So as a child, I always wanted to help save endangered species. I had that long dream since I was a little kid, and now I am one. Venerable Tarpa often uses this phrase, and it's so true to look at it, because Dharma practice is really learning to see things in the totally opposite way from how I normally view them. And that's incredibly rare. And to have the time and the interest to be able to do this is even more incredibly rare. So retreat is an excellent time to be able to see my patterns more clearly and to see that a lot of my patterns and behaviors are very similar to animals. So, I have a very deep habit of competition and running away. And I can see these very clearly in the deer and the turkeys. The deer are so quick to be flighty and run away at the slightest hint of danger, and the turkeys are so quick to be able to peck at each other at the slightest little thing. And I see that in my own mind, that it doesn't take any effort to do those behaviors. And I'm definitely seeing these more clearly in retreat. This retreat on refuge has shown these patterns even more clearly. The first half of the retreat, I loved working on reflecting on the qualities of the Buddha and the Dharma. I was feeling a lot of just joy and inspiration and admiration and connection. And that's easy because it's kind of a one-way relationship, that kind of like having a pet, they don't talk back to me. So it's easy. The Sangha and the teacher, that's a different story. That is a lot harder, and that's where I saw all of my projections and stories coming. And I know they're from my side because, they're not, the challenges aren't talked about in the great texts. They're all my own projections. And I can also really see how so much of this is shaped from childhood, from how I was influenced as a kid in my relationships, especially with my mom and my dad, and how they were so steeped in attachment and aversion. And so how naturally, sadly, I project those relationships onto the Sangha and my teacher without even realizing it. But the more I look again and again and again, the challenges I have in these relationships come back to connections with my parents and childhood. But the point of doing Dharma practice is to actually recognize these wrong views, that it's not going to be easy right away. And so that's what I've been able to start seeing those entities, those apart, so that I can genuinely take refuge in the three jewels rather than be terrified of them. But and to actually learn how to have healthy relationships without attachment and aversion, and to actually think about others besides just myself. So this is that whole turning everything inside out, backwards practice that we're working on. So what does this have to do with endangered species? So with endangered species, there's kind of three big categories of species that are facing threats. And the first category is population of animals that's facing threats to their habitat or to their population, to their numbers. And that group of species is called sensitive species. And so living at the Abbey and peeling away my false identities and false illusions of security, stability, and support, false identities that I had of, false identities, attractions to different activities and different distractions and friends. And the more I peel those away and see that those don't really bring kind of the stability and security that I'm looking for, the peace and the happiness, I've come to feel a lot more vulnerable in seeing that those old tricks just don't really work anymore. And so I've played with the analogy that sometimes I feel like a sea anemone, those little sea creatures that have a bunch of sticky tentacles. They survive by collecting all their nutrients from the ocean. And so they're always kind of out there reaching, grabbing, trying to get any kind of nutrient from the ocean, but then as soon as there's a threat, they go and they suck inside. And so quite often I feel like that, of just reaching out for the external things, and then there's a hint of threat, then I go and hide. I also see how sensitive I can be, especially in retreat, of taking responsibility for others' actions or perceptions that aren't really mine, and thinking, oh, why are they angry at me, or they acted grumpy? And it's like, but we're in silence, and so I can see that that's all just my own stuff. So I have no idea what's really going on with them. And that's why I love the phrase, mind your own dingwa, that it's, okay, come back inside. It's not about those external tentacles. It's what's about going on in here. And I've played with that phrase, love your own dingwa, because sometimes, or mind your own dingwa, because sometimes it can be, I turn inward and then I start judging myself, of like getting too stuck inside myself. So I've also played with the phrase of love your own dingwa. Like, let's be happy inside here. Here's my little dingwa. Let's cultivate contentment inside here. I think this being aware of the sensitivity maybe exposes a hint of the view of the permanent, unitary, independent view I have of myself, that I'm separate and solid. And so I've played with teasing this apart by using the acronym PUNY, that it's permanent, unitary, independent, but it's not really anything there. It feels like it's really big and important, but it's really puny. So ways to tease apart that feeling of solidity. The second category of kind of threatened or endangered species is the threatened species. And so this I've definitely also noticed, in that I always have an underlying fear and a current of anxiety and fear that gets expressed in many, many different ways. Another image that I have is, it's not like the sea anemone, but like the sea urchin, which is different, that they're also a sea creature, but they're hard and prickly. They're also hollow inside, but they have spikes instead of sticky tentacles. And so when I'm feeling threatened, that's what I feel like. I have my spikes out, and I act defensively in any little way, trying to always reinstate the feeling and the thought that I'm right, that I get puffed up trying to prove myself, that I'm capable and worthy, and I get locked into thinking that I'm right, and then I forget that I should use my logic and actually consider others' perspectives, that I'm not always right. But I get so stuck in that, gotta prove myself, gotta defend myself, that I forget the other perspectives. And sadly, this happens quite frequently with my teacher, that I'm still focused on trying to prove myself, that I forget that she actually has a lot more experience and wisdom than I do. and is seeing things actually from a much bigger, kinder, non-afflicted perspective than I am. And so this is, again, a way of flipping my mind and questioning that I'm seeing things in the complete opposite way. I'm seeing things that I'm right and she's wrong, but really she's right and I'm wrong most of the time. So that's another way to keep changing my perspective. Another view that I've seen is that when I feel threatened is if I perceive that I've disappointed someone and not met their expectations, which is, again, assuming that I know what they're thinking, but I see that I feel like I've disappointed them. But I react then by making them the enemy. I blame them, I get rebellious and obstinate, which is a defense strategy in rejecting them before they can reject me. I have a lot of those strategies of rejecting others before they can reject me, and they come up in many different ways. And I get angry to cover up and hurt the disappointment that I feel, that from what genuinely started out as wanting to help the person turns into distancing myself and separating from them when I don't meet either their expectations or the high expectations that I had of myself. And again, feeling threatened really heightens the sense of self, of activating that, I think, that view of the self-sufficient, substantially existent self, which I've nicknamed the cesspool, because it's all about me, that I am me, and let me prove it to you. And don't tell me because I know better than you. And it's, yeah, a very solidifying view that is just, again, trying to prove myself, but it's really, there's nothing to prove there. So both these sensitive and threatened views are super hyper-focused on me, the self-centered mind puffing up and defending, and creates a lot of stories about me, forgetting completely about others' perspectives, not thinking about their view that they might actually be in pain or upset, and that their actions have absolutely nothing to do with me. So then we get to the category of the endangered species, which is an extremely rare species at serious risk of going extinct. And this is where we are, because to practice the Dharma and to go in the complete opposite flow from society and our conditioning is incredibly rare. We're also endangered species because to be able to have the right conditions, the time, the practice, the interest to do this is incredibly rare. And sadly, the decline of monasticism in the world is not increasing, it's actually going down and not as common as it used to be because of political instability and many different factors. But it's, again, it's, yeah, keeping the Dharma and Buddhism in the world is not a guarantee, and that's incredibly rare, and to recognize that and uphold that, we need to, yeah, continue to protect it. And then also what is really rare is the mind of actually thinking of others and trying to subdue the self-centered thought. I was inspired when Geshe Tabke was talking a couple of weeks ago that as soon as we have this view of I, then we draw our borders and designate them as them, and we create separation. But our whole practice and purpose is to try to dissolve these divisions and recognize our shared humanity and our similarities. And we're actually working on trying to remember that we all want happiness and we all don't want to suffer. Just simply remembering their kindness and the good qualities of others. I've practiced in reducing this view of feeling threatened by actually just looking at people and naming 3 good qualities that I admire and appreciate about others. And it's actually really fun, and it really softens and dissolves the view of someone else being the enemy and the threat. But again, just like being an animal, it takes training and practice again and again and again with kind of slow, patient, gentle kindness, and just reminding myself again and again that there is no real threat. I think one of the monastics, I'm not sure who said it, that used a phrase that says, check your mind. Are you seeing others as kind? And I really like that phrase of just, again, it's a way of flipping the mind, of subduing the fear, threat, reactivity within me, and just being like, oh, wait, am I seeing these people as kind? And then I can actually have a lot more room to see our commonality. There was a species called the passenger pigeon that used to be incredibly rare. I was just looking it up. There used to be 3 to 5 billion of these birds in America. I read one little report that said that when they flew in flocks, it would be days of them flying before the skies would clear and you wouldn't see them again. So they were incredibly abundant, and now they're extinct because people took them for granted. They just ate them and completely, yeah, obliterated them. And this is, I think, a good reminder for how we take things for granted, and we can abuse them and then lose them. And kindness and warm-heartedness is our most precious thing, that if we take it for granted, we can lose it, and then the whole world falls apart. And so how important it is to actually appreciate that quality and to actively cultivate it. And continuing to recognize that there's really nothing to defend. Last winter, I think it was, I came up with another little phrase that said that there's nothing to hold on to, but everything to expand into. Again, there's nothing to defend, to prove, or to boost up, but there's everything, the whole world, to open up to learn from and to be transformed by. And that's kind of that idea that Rob Priest has, is the difference between dukkha, which is contraction, that self-grasping, focused view, versus sukha, which is happiness and bliss, and he translates it as spaciousness. So I love being able to get that feel of the difference between when I'm closed down versus open up and expansive. And so in looking at these different defenses and delusions that take me away from my kind of highest aspirations and the three jewels, that shows me where my practice edge is. And so it's areas to tease apart the ignorance and the attachment and the aversion, and to keep shifting my mind away from the self-centered view. So our goal is to actually make the self-centered view go extinct, and to cultivate the qualities of seeing the kindness of others and appreciate others, make those qualities flourish with abundance and joy. Thank you.